In the private parking garage of the corporate tower, a supercar worth millions sat motionless, while a circle of the nation's top engineers stood around it, heads bowed in confusion. The young CEO, cold and composed, clenched her fists with a mixture of shame and fury. No one could find the problem. At that exact moment, a man in a janitor's uniform, walking with his young daughter, stopped nearby. He tilted his head, listening to the engine. 10 seconds later, he said something that left everyone speechless. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Reynolds Dynamics. The glass tower rose 43 floors above the city, its sleek facade reflecting the pale dawn light. Inside, 3,000 employees moved through their routines with practiced efficiency. But on the executive level, the day had already gone wrong. Victoria Reynolds stood in the private parking garage beneath the building, staring at her car as if willing it to obey. The supercar gleamed under the fluorescent lights, all carbon fiber curves and precision engineering. It had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. It represented everything she had worked for: power, success, control, and now it refused to start. She pressed the ignition button again. The dashboard lit up perfectly. Every system showed green, but when she engaged the starter, nothing happened, except a strange, stuttering hum that seemed to come from deep within the machine. Victoria was 34 years old and had spent the last decade proving she belonged in a world that constantly questioned her right to lead. As CEO of Reynolds Dynamics, a corporation that built energy systems for half the world's infrastructure, she had learned early that any sign of weakness would be exploited. Her board was filled with men twice her age who still called her Miss Reynolds in meetings, their voices dripping with condescension. The press watched her every move, waiting for her to fail so they could write their too young, too ambitious headlines. The supercar was more than transportation. It was armor. It said, "I made it. I won. Don't question me." And now it wouldn't start. She had an 11 o'clock meeting with a consortium from Singapore, a $5 billion contract, the kind of deal that would cement her position for years to come. Major shareholders were flying in. The parking garage was supposed to be empty at this hour, but she could already hear footsteps echoing in the distance. Word was spreading. People were coming to see. Victoria pulled out her phone and called the head of engineering. 20 minutes later, 4 men in company polo shirts stood around the vehicle, their faces tight with concentration. Martin Hayes, the chief engineer, was 48 and had worked on aerospace systems before joining Reynolds Dynamics. If anyone could solve this, it should be him. He connected a diagnostic tablet to the car's computer. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. He frowned, scrolled back, checked again. "The software shows no errors," he said quietly. "Every subsystem is responding normally. Then why won't it start?" Victoria's voice was controlled, but there was an edge beneath it. "I'm not sure, Miss Reynolds." He glanced at his colleagues, who were examining other components. One was checking the battery connections. Another was testing the fuel injection system. The third had the hood open and was studying the engine block. Minutes passed. The engineers murmured to each other in technical language, pointing at various parts, running tests. Victoria stood to the side, arms crossed, watching. She could feel her composure beginning to crack. This was exactly the kind of moment her critics lived for. The brilliant young CEO defeated by her own car. She checked her watch. 9:45. The visitors would arrive in 75 minutes. More footsteps. She turned to see 2 members of her executive team approaching, their expressions carefully neutral. They had heard. Of course they had heard. "Everything all right?" one of them asked. "Fine," Victoria said sharply. "Just a minor technical issue." But it wasn't fine. Hayes had now moved from the tablet to physically inspecting components. He was opening access panels, checking connections, his movements becoming more rapid and less certain. The other engineers were doing the same. They had the organized confidence of experts. But that confidence was starting to look like performance, like they were going through motions they knew wouldn't work. Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. They had no idea what was wrong. At 9:58, Daniel Carter pushed his cleaning cart past the entrance to the executive garage. He wasn't supposed to be here during the day. His shift ran from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, when the building was mostly empty and he could work without being seen. But his daughter's school had called. Lily was running a slight fever. Nothing serious, but they wanted someone to pick her up. Daniel had left work early, collected her from the nurse's office, and was now heading back through the building to clock out properly. Lily walked beside him, small hand gripping the edge of his uniform sleeve. She was 7 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and Daniel's serious expression. She wasn't crying about feeling sick. Lily rarely cried. She just looked tired and a little pale, her backpack hanging from one shoulder. They passed the garage entrance, and Lily stopped. "Dad," she said, pointing. "What's wrong with that car?" Daniel glanced over. He saw the supercar immediately. Hard to miss. He also saw the cluster of men around it, their body language radiating frustration. His instinct was to keep walking. Whatever was happening, there was none of his business. He was a janitor. They were engineers. Those worlds didn't intersect, but Lily was already moving toward the scene, curious. Daniel followed, one hand on her shoulder. They stood at the edge of the garage bay, watching. The engineers were debating something, their voices clipping with tension. One of them reached for the ignition. The car made that stuttering sound again. Lily tilted her head, listening. "That's different from yesterday," she said softly. Daniel blinked. "What?" "Yesterday, when we walked past, it sounded smooth, like a heartbeat. Now it sounds like it's breathing wrong." He looked down at his daughter. She had always been sensitive to mechanical sounds. When she was 3, she had told him their neighbor's lawnmower was tired 2 days before it broke down. She couldn't explain how she knew. She just said machines told her things. Daniel listened now, really listened. The way his father had taught him 20 years ago, before everything changed, before he became invisible. The sound was subtle, a micro skip in the rhythm, not an electrical fault, something deeper, something in the timing itself. One of the engineers noticed them standing there. "Can I help you?" His tone made it clear they shouldn't be there. "No, sir," Daniel said automatically. "We were just... This is a private area. You need to move along." Daniel nodded, starting to turn. But Lily spoke up. "Why does the car breathe different?" The engineer stared at her. "The engine. Yesterday it had a rhythm. Now it doesn't." She said it so simply, as if it were obvious. Victoria Reynolds, who had been standing apart from the group, looked over for the first time. She saw a man in a janitor's uniform and a child who should be in school. She saw another interruption in what was already a catastrophic morning. "Hayes," she said quietly, "please escort them out." But Daniel was still listening to the car. His eyes were closed now, his head tilted at a slight angle. He had that look Lily had seen 1,000 times, the one that meant he was somewhere else, seeing patterns no one else could see. "Dad?" Lily whispered. Daniel opened his eyes. He looked at the car, then at the engineers, then at the woman who was clearly in charge. "Ma'am," he said, "I know this isn't my place, but I think I know what's wrong." The silence that followed was absolute. Hayes recovered first. "You think you know what's wrong?" "Yes, sir." "You're a janitor." "Yes, sir." "And you think you can diagnose a hypercar that 4 mechanical engineers can't figure out?" Daniel didn't respond to the sarcasm. He just nodded. Victoria studied him. There was something in his face that didn't match his uniform. A steadiness, a certainty. She was about to dismiss him. Every instinct told her to. but she was also desperate. "What do you think is wrong?" she asked. Daniel took a breath. "It's not the software. And it's not the battery or the fuel system. The problem is in the synchronization." "The synchronization," Hayes repeated flatly. "Yes, sir. The engine management system recently received an update. I heard them installing it yesterday when I was cleaning this level. The update changed the firing sequence by 0.03 seconds. It's within normal parameters on paper. But this engine was hand-built. The tolerances are tighter than standard. That tiny shift created a resonance cascade. The pistons are trying to fire, but they're out of phase with the valve timing. The computer thinks everything is fine because technically everything is within range. But mechanically, it's locked." The engineers stared at him. Victoria felt something shift in her chest. She had no idea if what he was saying was true, but he had said it with complete confidence. Not arrogance, just knowledge. "That's impossible," Hayes said. "The update was tested extensively. On standard engines," Daniel said gently. "Not on hand-built ones." Lily tugged her father's sleeve. "Can you fix it, Dad?" He looked down at her. Then at Victoria. "If you'll let me try, ma'am." Victoria made a decision in that moment that went against every lesson she had learned. She nodded. "What do you need?" she asked. "A Phillips head screwdriver." And 30 seconds with the engine off. Hayes started to protest, but Victoria cut him off with a gesture. One of the engineers fetched a screwdriver from a toolkit. Daniel took it, walked to the car, and crouched beside the open hood. Lily stood next to him, counting softly under her breath. Daniel reached into the engine compartment, his movements precise. He found the mechanical override valve, the one that controlled the micro-adjustments in the timing system. It was a component most people didn't even know existed. He made a single adjustment, a quarter turn. Maybe less. 28, 29, 30. Lily finished. Daniel stood up, stepped back, and looked at Victoria. "Try it now, ma'am." Victoria moved to the driver's seat. Her hand hovered over the ignition button. She pressed it. The engine fired instantly. The sound was perfect, smooth, powerful. Exactly as it should be. The parking garage fell completely silent. Hayes approached the engine, staring at the adjustment Daniel had made. He pulled out his tablet, ran another diagnostic. His face went pale. "He's right," Hayes said quietly. "The resonance pattern is gone. The timing is synchronized." He looked at Daniel with something between shock and anger. "How did you know?" Daniel didn't answer. He just stood there, hand on Lily's shoulder, looking like he wanted to disappear. Victoria stepped out of the car. She walked slowly toward Daniel. Her mind was racing. This man, wearing a uniform that marked him as one of the building's invisible workers, had just solved in 30 seconds what her senior engineers couldn't solve in an hour. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel Carter, ma'am." "How long have you worked here, Mr. Carter?" 4 years, ma'am." "And before that?" He hesitated. "I'd rather not say, ma'am." She studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to Hayes. "Pull his file. I want to know everything." 2 hours later, Victoria sat in her office on the 42nd floor, reading a personnel file that made no sense. Daniel Carter, age 36, high school diploma, no college. Employment history showed 4 years as night custodian at Reynolds Dynamics. Before that, spotty work, warehouse jobs, manual labor. Nothing that explained what had just happened. She made a call to her head of security. "I need a deeper background check. Full history. Daniel Carter, janitor, 4th floor night shift." The results came back by end of day. Victoria read them twice, unable to believe what she was seeing. Daniel Carter had attended MIT, full scholarship, graduated top of his mechanical engineering program at age 22, recruited by a defense contractor, worked on classified military projects, published 3 papers that were still considered groundbreaking in acoustic engineering. By 26, he was being called one of the most promising minds in the field. Then, everything stopped. At 28, he left the defense contractor. No explanation in the file. After that, nothing. He vanished from the professional world, resurfaced 6 years later, applying for a custodian position at Reynolds Dynamics, claiming he needed steady night work because he was raising a daughter alone. The file included a death certificate. Sarah Carter, his wife, killed in a car accident 8 years ago. Their daughter, Lily, had been in the car too. She survived. Sarah didn't. Victoria set the file down and looked out at the city. The Singapore contract had been signed. The meeting had gone perfectly. The shareholders were pleased. Her position was secure, all because a janitor fixed her car. No, not a janitor. A genius who had chosen to become a janitor. She picked up her phone and made another call. That evening, Daniel was cleaning the 42nd floor when Victoria's assistant found him. "Miss Reynolds would like to see you in her office." Daniel's stomach tightened. He knew this was coming. He had broken the first rule: never be seen, never be noticed, never remind them that you exist for anything except cleaning their messes. He followed the assistant to Victoria's office. The space was massive, all glass and steel. Victoria sat behind her desk, the city lights glowing behind her. "Sit down, Mr. Carter." He sat, uncomfortable in the expensive chair. Victoria slid the file across the desk. "Why didn't you tell us?" Daniel looked at the papers. His old life, summarized in bureaucratic language. "You didn't ask, ma'am. You had a brilliant career. You were making real contributions. Why did you walk away?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My wife died. My daughter was hurt. I was traveling constantly, working 100-hour weeks on projects I couldn't tell anyone about. I realized I had everything except what mattered, so I chose differently. You chose to be a janitor. I chose to be Lily's father." He met her eyes. "The night shift pays enough. The hours let me be there when she wakes up. No one expects anything from me except clean floors. It's a good life, ma'am." Victoria leaned back. "I'm offering you a position. Senior mechanical consultant. You'd work with Hayes's team. Full benefits. Salary of $250,000 to start." "No, thank you, ma'am." She blinked. "I appreciate it. But no. Mr. Carter, you just diagnosed a problem that stumped 4 experienced engineers. You clearly have skills we need. Why would you say no?" "Because I've had that life. I know what it costs." He stood up. "If that's all, ma'am, I need to finish the West Wing before my shift ends." Victoria watched him walk toward the door. She couldn't remember the last time someone had refused her anything. "Your daughter asked why the engine breathed differently," she said. "How did she know?" Daniel paused. "She listens. Really listens. It's not about hearing with your ears. It's about paying attention to things most people ignore." He glanced back. "With respect, ma'am, that's why your engineers couldn't fix your car. They were looking at data." He left. Victoria sat alone in her office for a long time, staring at the file on her desk. She had built her career on being the smartest person in the room, on having the answers, on never showing weakness. And today, a man who cleaned her floors had made her realize she had been missing something fundamental. 3 weeks passed. Victoria didn't see Daniel again. Their worlds didn't overlap. He worked nights, she worked days, but she couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. Then the crisis hit. Reynolds Dynamics had been developing a new turbine system for offshore wind farms. It was the company's flagship project, representing 2 years of work and $4 billion in projected revenue. The first installation was scheduled to go live in Norway in 6 weeks. Everything was on schedule until the turbines started failing. Not all of them, just 3 of the 12 units. They would spin up normally, reach optimal speed, and then suddenly cease, complete mechanical failure. No warning. The Norwegian company threatened to cancel the entire contract. Other clients started making worried calls. Victoria assembled her best people. They worked around the clock. They replaced components, ran simulations, checked every calculation. The failures made no sense. The turbines that worked and the turbines that failed were identical. Same materials, same assembly process, same everything. 2 weeks became 1 week. Then 3 days. The company was hemorrhaging money. The Norwegian representatives were threatening legal action. The board started making noises about Victoria's leadership. She sat in the conference room at 2 in the morning, surrounded by exhausted engineers, staring at computer models that refused to explain what was happening. Hayes looked defeated. "We've checked everything." Victoria thought about a man who fixed a hypercar by listening, about a little girl who knew machines spoke if you paid attention. She made a call. Daniel arrived 90 minutes later, still in his work uniform, Lily with him, because he couldn't leave her alone at home at this hour. The conference room full of engineers looked up in confusion as the janitor walked in. "Miss Reynolds?" Hayes said carefully. "Mr. Carter is going to help us." Victoria gestured to the screens showing the turbine designs. "These are failing. We don't know why. I need you to look." Daniel studied the screens for a long moment. Then he turned to Victoria. "I need 3 things. First, actual audio recordings of the turbines when they fail, not data analysis. Raw sound. Second, no one interrupts me while I'm listening. And third," he glanced at Lily, "she stays with me. If I'm doing this, she's part of it." Victoria nodded. They set him up in an empty office with the audio files. Lily sat next to him, her small headphones connected to the same source. Father and daughter listened in silence while the engineers waited outside. 40 minutes later, Daniel emerged. "The turbines aren't failing," he said. "They're protecting themselves." "What?" "You installed new monitoring software 6 weeks ago. It increased the sensitivity of the stress sensors. The turbines that are failing are the ones installed in locations with higher ambient vibration, not from the turbines themselves, from ocean current patterns. The software is detecting micro-vibrations that are technically within safe limits, but triggering an automatic shutdown because the threshold was lowered. It's not a mechanical problem. It's a calibration problem." Hayes pulled up the software logs. His hands were shaking slightly. 2 minutes later, he looked up. He's right. The 3 failed sites all have unusual current patterns. If we adjust the sensitivity threshold by 0.05, the shutdowns will stop, Daniel finished. But you should also add a filter to distinguish between external and internal vibration. Otherwise, you'll have the same problem in any high-current area. The room erupted. Engineers started talking over each other, pulling up code, running new simulations. The solution was elegant, simple, and it worked. Victoria watched them work, watched Daniel stand there looking uncomfortable with the attention, watched Lily leaning against her father's side, half asleep. She walked over to them. "Thank you," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "You're welcome, ma'am. I'm going to ask you again. Will you work for me?" "No, ma'am." "Why not?" "Because you don't need me to work for you. You need to learn what I do." He met her eyes. "You're brilliant. Your people are brilliant. But you're all looking at numbers and forgetting the machines are real. You've built something between you and what you're trying to understand. I didn't fix anything today. I just removed the barrier." "Then, teach me," Victoria said. "Teach all of us. Consultant work. Your own hours. You don't even have to come to the office. Just be available when we need someone who remembers to listen." Daniel looked down at Lily. She nodded sleepily. "Okay," he said finally. "But I keep my night job. And you never make me wear a suit. Deal." The announcement went out the next morning. Daniel Carter, special consultant. The board was furious. The engineers were confused. The media had a field day with the story of the janitor genius. Daniel ignored all of it. He still worked his night shift, still cleaned floors. But now, once or twice a week, he'd spend a few hours consulting on complex problems. And slowly, the culture at Reynolds Dynamics began to change. Engineers started listening differently, paying attention to sounds, to rhythms, to the small details that computers couldn't quantify. Victoria herself began spending time in the development labs, not just reading reports, but actually experiencing the machines they built. 6 months after the supercar incident, Victoria stood in the parking garage again. Daniel was there with Lily, about to head home after a consultation session. The supercar gleamed in its usual spot. "Mr. Carter," Victoria said, "I realized I never properly thanked you, not just for fixing my car, for showing me what I was missing. You thanked me plenty, ma'am. The consulting fees are generous." "I'm not talking about money." She hesitated, then continued. "I spent my whole life proving I belonged, being perfect, never showing weakness. I thought listening was the same as doubting myself. You taught me it's the opposite." Daniel smiled slightly. "Lily taught me the same thing. After Sarah died, I thought I had to have all the answers, be strong all the time. Then one day, Lily asked me why I never cried. I said, 'Dads don't cry.' She said that was sad, because crying is how you let the hurt out so it doesn't stay stuck inside." He looked at his daughter. 7 years old and wiser than I'll ever be. Lily beamed up at him. Victoria felt something crack in her chest. She had spent so long being the ice queen, the untouchable CEO, that she had forgotten what it felt like to just be human. "Would you?" she started, then stopped. "Would you and Lily like to get dinner sometime?" Daniel looked surprised. Then he glanced at Lily, who nodded enthusiastically. "We'd like that, ma'am." "Victoria," she corrected. "Call me Victoria." They walked together toward the exit, an unlikely trio. The CEO, the janitor, and the 7-year-old who understood machines better than all of them. The supercar sat in its spot, engine silent now. No longer a symbol of power, but a reminder that sometimes the most complex problems have the simplest solutions. You just have to listen. In the months that followed, Daniel never became a traditional employee. He remained the night janitor who occasionally consulted on impossible problems. Lily still went to regular school and spent her evenings at the office when her father worked. And Victoria still ran the company with the same fierce intelligence she always had. But something fundamental had shifted. The parking garage where it all started became a different kind of space. Engineers would sometimes stand there, eyes closed, listening to the ambient sounds of the building, learning to hear what they had been trained to measure. Victoria kept the supercar. But she drove it less. She found herself taking the subway more often, walking through the city, paying attention to the rhythms of ordinary life she had been too busy to notice before. One evening, she found Daniel in the executive-level break room during his shift. Lily was there too, doing homework at one of the tables. Victoria poured herself coffee and sat down across from the girl. "What are you working on?" she asked. "Science project," Lily said. "We have to build something that solves a problem." "What are you building?" Lily held up a sketch. It showed a simple device, something that looked like a tuning fork attached to a mechanical housing. It listens to washing machines and tells you when they're about to break, so people can fix them before they die. My friend Emma's washing machine died last week and her mom couldn't afford a new one, and they had to go to the laundromat for 3 weeks. Victoria studied the drawing. It was crude but conceptually sound. "That's brilliant. Dad helped me with the design. But it was my idea. It was all her idea, Daniel called from across the room, where he was emptying trash bins. I just helped with the math. Victoria looked at the sketch again, at the simple elegance of it, at the fact that a 7-year-old had seen a problem and created a solution not because it would make money or win awards, but because it would help her friend's mother. Lily, she said slowly, what if Reynolds Dynamics helped you build this? Really build it, and we gave them away for free to communities that needed them. Lily's eyes went wide. Really? Really. I think it's exactly the kind of thing we should be doing. Daniel stopped what he was doing and looked at Victoria. She met his eyes and saw approval there. Not gratitude. Just a quiet recognition that she was finally understanding. The project launched 3 months later. The Carter Early Warning System, named after Lily and Daniel. Simple devices, cheaply made, distributed through community centers and affordable housing complexes. They didn't make Reynolds Dynamics any money, but they saved families from expensive repairs and built goodwill in communities the company had never thought to reach. The board grumbled. The shareholders questioned, but Victoria held firm. Some things, she explained, were more important than quarterly returns. On the 1-year anniversary of the Supercar incident, Victoria organized a small gathering. Just Daniel, Lily, Hayes, and a few of the engineers who had been there that day. They stood in the parking garage around the car that had started it all. I wanted to mark this moment, Victoria said. Not because of what happened to the car, but because of what it taught us. She looked at each person there. We were so focused on being right that we forgot to listen. So focused on proving our expertise that we missed the simple truth right in front of us. This company is better now because one man and one little girl reminded us that wisdom doesn't always look the way we expect. Hayes spoke up. I was angry that day, embarrassed that a janitor solved something I couldn't. But Daniel didn't make me feel small. He just showed me what I was missing. I'm a better engineer now because of that. The others nodded in agreement. Lily tugged her father's sleeve. Dad, are you glad you helped? Daniel looked around at these people, at this space where his life had changed. He thought about the years of invisibility, of choosing a small life to protect what mattered most. He thought about Sarah, who would have been proud. He thought about the path he had walked to get here. Yeah, sweetheart, he said softly. I'm glad. They stood together in the soft light of the parking garage, no longer separated by titles or uniforms or assumptions. Just people who had learned that the most important skill in any field isn't technical knowledge or raw intelligence. It's the willingness to listen, to really listen, to the quiet voices, to the unusual ideas, to the solutions that come from unexpected places, to the sound of an engine that isn't quite right, to a child who notices what adults miss, to the possibility that wisdom might arrive in a janitor's uniform, carrying a screwdriver and 30 seconds of perfect attention. Victoria Reynolds went on to lead Reynolds Dynamics for another 15 years. Under her leadership, the company became known not just for technical innovation, but for a culture of humility and listening. They never forgot the lesson of the supercar. Daniel Carter remained the night janitor who consulted on impossible problems. He never wanted fame or recognition. He just wanted to do meaningful work and be home when Lily woke up. That never changed. Lily Carter grew up to be an engineer herself, but unlike the engineers who had surrounded her father's first breakthrough, she never forgot that the most sophisticated technology in the world is useless if you forget to listen to what it's telling you. And the supercar? It ran perfectly for years. Every time Victoria saw it, she remembered the morning it wouldn't start. The morning she learned that sometimes the most complex problems have the simplest solutions. You just have to stop, close your eyes, and listen. Because, in the end, fixing broken things, machines, systems, relationships, isn't about having the right tools or the most advanced